I know that deep down inside, all of us, or at least most of us, are inherently good as human beings. It's just it's hard to find the right opportunity. It's hard to find the right group of people or even a community to sort of like put that into practice. But I believe that if we continue building communities like the Bike Scouts and providing people with the right opportunity to put this mindset, this culture, this behavior or habit into practice, I think there's a chance that we can actually, really, really make a difference without having to wait for like something big to happen, something super grand. Instead, we can just do it by ourselves, do it on our own, even with whatever we have. So, in a way, that is at the heart of what the Bike Scouts community is.
Good morning to everybody who is in the room. It's 8 o'clock. It's Japan Expert Insights, the Wednesday morning session. Today we have the pleasure to welcome Miles Delphin. This is the first time to talk with him here. So Miles is based in the Philippines, and he's the founder of the Bike Scouts, an organization that delivers services in natural disasters, the time of natural disasters. So it is something that we have seen time and time again in Japan here, not exactly in the same form, of course, but this is, the Bike Scouts, they work in times when people need their help the most. And when we met Miles the other day and talked with him, the conversation we had was truly inspirational and truly educational. I would like you to introduce yourself and also tell us what the Bike Scouts is and also how you came up with the idea.
Absolutely. I should say maybe Ohayo gozaimasu. Did I say that right? Good morning to everyone. I'm very, very happy to be here. So I'm Miles. I'm based here in the Philippines. It's Bike Scouts. I started it 10 years ago. On the day that Typhoon Yolanda made landfall here in the Philippines. So just in case anyone isn't familiar or can't remember Typhoon Yolanda anymore, it was a Category 5 typhoon that made landfall, actually multiple landfalls in the Philippines. It had a maximum sustained wind of around 315 kilometers per hour, I think. And it left like a lot of damage, and a lot of people lost their lives as well. So this was the wake-up call, actually, for the Philippines and for the Filipino people regarding the reality of climate change and the reality of the impact of severe disasters because of climate change. And so 10 years on, Bike Scouts has actually become a social platform for doing good. Because back in 2013, we worked originally just specifically as volunteer bicycle messengers for disaster response. So what that means actually is that we took our bicycles and then we went out and rode them in at ground zero and surrounding areas. This was in the province of Leyte and Samar, in the central part of the Philippine archipelago. If you look at Google Maps, you'll find both Leyte province and Samar province. These are the most badly hit areas during that time. And so we were there, and then we worked there for 4 months. The work that we did back then was simply to provide an alternative access to essential supplies, communication, and information. And communication has actually been a very central part of the work that we do as Bike Scouts. Because on the day that Typhoon Yolanda was making its landfall in the Philippines, I was actually sitting in my office. I used to work in an advertising agency, and then I was watching the news, and I couldn't help but notice how people were getting the support that they needed in terms of like shelter, medicine, water, and everything, all of the basic essentials, basically. And but one of the most crucial things I noticed that people didn't have access to was actually communication and information. So what I mean by that is that they were sitting in these evacuation tents. They were getting taken care of, by humanitarian organizations and the government. But they had no way of knowing if their loved ones, if their relatives, their friends were okay, because they were all separated during the evacuation and during the time that they had to literally run for their lives, because this was a Category 5 typhoon. And so, like, here in the Philippines, what happens is that I could be living in one city or one town, and then in the next city or one town, I would have my relatives and friends there, because here in the Philippines, community and family is very big. And so a lot of times we don't really stray too far from where we were born or where we're based, and all of our relatives are in that area. And so when something like this happens, we get separated. And one of the most important things I've noticed over the past 10 years about getting separated and having no access to communication and information actually is that when that happens, it also impacts very greatly the ability of people to have hope, because then we lose sort of like an anchor. We lose our like reference point for where we should start hoping again after such a severe event. And so what we did was basically just went out using our bicycles. And this is not something that we invented, of course. Bicycle messengers have been around for like forever, for as long as I know. And basically we just use that for something even more than just delivering messages or packages. And in this case, for Typhoon Yolanda, we practically carried like all kinds of things, from water, food, medicine, and other things on our backs, in our backpacks, using our bicycles. And the reason why how I actually came up with this idea of using our bicycles, because when I was much, much younger, I actually used to race mountain bikes. So I used to race cross-country events. I used to race 24-hour and 12-hour endurance events. And until now, actually, I still do regularly. I do long distance rides. It's just something that I love doing. And so from that experience, I basically had the idea that if I take that bicycle, and because I know that bicycles can go anywhere, they're very easy to maintain. They're basically the most resilient form of mobility on the planet. And so I took the bicycle and I asked a few of my friends, just probably like 5 of my friends that on Facebook actually, that, hey, I told them that I asked them, do you guys want to come with me? We'll get on an Air Force plane, bring our bikes, go there and help people. And by that evening, actually, after I made that post, we had over 200 volunteers when we met at a bicycle shop here near my house, actually. And so our very first support came from a bicycle brand called Specialized. They had a store. They have a store actually until now here in the Philippines, and then they were saying that you could use our showroom for your first meeting, and so over 200 people crammed into that space that evening, and the following day we were on our way to Ground Zero, and so yeah, that's how we started in 2013, and now in 2023. In the past 2 years, we've actually been recognized by Meta, which is of course the parent company of Facebook, because we really started on Facebook groups. Basically, that's where we started building our community, and then we got the opportunity to become a part of the Facebook Community Accelerator Program, which is a program that Facebook has to support growing communities or meaningful communities on their platform. And so we were lucky enough to be part of the 1% that was invited to that, and very, very lucky to have won the funding coming from that program. And so, yeah, basically that's what the Bike Scouts is as of today. And I'm very happy that we have a community of volunteers and community members all across the Philippines now. Our active volunteer numbers are around 100,000, but of course, not all of them are active at the same time and all the time. What happens is that, much like on Facebook or any other social media, so we have a lot of community members of the Bike Scouts. And on a daily basis, we talk about our bicycle rides. We talk about maybe training for like disaster response or emergency response. It depends on what the interests are of individual members. So the reason why we grew so much is because in the beginning, I didn't actually think that, I didn't actually thought of like growing it into an actual community. I thought that after our initial deployment, our initial response for Typhoon Yolanda, that would be it. But by the time we got back to Manila, coming from Ground Zero in the Visayas, there were so many people who saw our story because we were featured in the media. A lot of the reporters saw us on the ground, and so they started like talking to different Bike Scouts volunteers there, and they found out about the story basically. And we were also partnered that time with Rappler, which is an online digital news company, which is headed, of course, by Maria Ressa. And if you're not familiar with Maria Ressa, she used to work with CNN, and then she started Rappler, and she recently won the Nobel Peace Prize for journalism, for her work here in the Philippines. And so we were featured by Rappler and other media outlets. And then so by the time we got back to Manila, a lot of people were asking, how can we become a part of this? Because in our own town, in our own village, in our own city, we're having the same problems, like flooding, powerful typhoons, and a lot of other disasters. Because here in the Philippines, by the way, I should mention that Philippines has consistently ranked number one among the most at-risk places in the world when it comes to climate change and specifically severe disasters. So much so that 74% of our population and land area is actually at risk to severe disasters every single year. And if we take a look at this Typhoon Yolanda back in 2013 and the more recent Typhoon Odette, which was in 2021, both of these storms were actually Category 5s. And every year the Philippines expects, or actually for sure, we're going to get at least 20 severe typhoons. A lot of them will be Category 5s between the months of between late October and January, sometimes all the way up to February. So that's the reality that we live with here in the Philippines, and the reason why a lot of people were asking us how they could be a part of the Bike Scouts and how they could help. But of course, not everyone was sort of like the perfect fit to go to the actual ground zero of these events. And I didn't really think that I should be encouraging people to do that, because disaster response is really not for everyone, and it shouldn't be something that anyone should experience if it's not necessary, because it really, really affects you. It changes you when you see the impacts of these disasters on people's lives. And so what we did was, I decided that maybe we should just become like a formal community, so that anyone who has time, anyone who has anything to share, or with the community, when it comes to resilience, sustainability, disaster preparedness, and community-based disaster response specifically, they would have a place to come and join other people who have the same interest. And so we started like building up the community on Facebook groups, and we basically, when we hit around 3,000, 4,000 members, and it's not a lot if you compare that to like the regular influencer site, but this is like for disaster response. This is for resilience. This is not something that people sort of like search the web for so that they can be a part of. And we sort of like, I was surprised that we even got to that number. So by the time we hit around 3,000 members, I decided that, okay, we need to identify like team leaders in each area, because we were starting to have members around the Philippines. It was getting harder to manage the entire community. And so we decided to have team leaders. And then the number the number of members in the community went even higher. So we hit around 4,000, 5,000. And then that's the time that we decided that we should break up the community groups into specific areas. So there would our main Facebook group is for team leaders. We have over 5,000 there. And then each team leader are actually members of founders or officers of their own cycling clubs, community groups in different places around the Philippines. So they have like members in their own groups between 2,000, and some of them even have 15,000 members. And so they set up their own Facebook group, still under the Bike Scouts name, but with the name of their province, town, or city connected to that, so that it would be easier for everyone to find the specific Bike Scouts team or community that they need to connect with for projects, for events, activities, and of course for disaster response. And so now we have like a lot of these different Bike Scouts groups on Facebook all across the Philippines. We have one here, like for example, in my area, we call it Bike Scouts San Pedro, because it's the noun of the city, and then so on and so forth. And in 2021, we were very, very fortunate to be able to launch our own mobile app. And we did this because on Facebook, of course, a lot of times people share pictures and captions and stories of what's happening in their own area whenever there's a disaster that happens. But on the side of humanitarian organizations, responders, rescuers, because we're also now partnered with these different organizations, it's very difficult for them to identify which of these posts are real and which of them are not so real. And a lot of times the problem is that when people share information on social media, it's very hard to verify the accuracy and, of course, the if it's like current. There was a time when someone posted a request, for example, on Facebook, and posted a picture of a mother and her daughter stuck on a roof, and there was like severe flooding all over them. And the person who posted the post said that these people need immediate help. And so what happened was a lot of rescuers in that area scrambled to find them, and they could not because the photo was actually from 3 years prior. And so this is the problem that we had to deal with, because it would be sort of like a case of the boy who cried wolf or something. If we keep on doing that, eventually our partners will run out of resources, or they'll just stop believing that there's an actual emergency that they need to respond to, because there's just so much manpower, there's just so much resource available for disaster response when something severe happens, that we need to be very accurate. We need to be at least be able to verify on the ground. And so one of the strengths of the Bike Scouts is that we are everywhere in the Philippines. And so if something happens, like for example, recently there was a really massive earthquake on the northernmost island of the Philippines called Batanes. And this island is so northern that it's actually closer to Taiwan than it is to the mainland of the Philippines called Luzon Island. So a really big earthquake happened there. And on that very early morning when this powerful earthquake happened, we were watching it on live video because we had Bike Scouts who were living on this island. And in the entire country, we were the only ones who had this real-time and verifiable information about a disaster that was ongoing. And so that was the sort of like the reason for us to build this mobile app, because we needed a platform that did not have the constraints of Facebook, because Facebook, of course, they have to sort of like make sure they're compliant with a lot of things, and a lot of times photos and videos and captions about that are disaster related, not really the most perfect thing that you should be posting on Facebook. And a lot of times, pictures of people who are suffering from the impacts of disasters, they don't really deserve to be sort of like, they don't deserve to go viral on social media. And so we built this mobile app, actually without money. There was a Bike Scout member who just basically volunteered and said, I build apps and we can do this together. And so we have that now. So the app basically looks like, it works similar to Instagram. You can post a photo, you can post a caption. The only difference is that it has the option for the users to activate geolocation. And this geolocation feature is actually the most important part, because once a photo is posted on the app, it will show its location on the map. Of course, we provide training for our members and the users of the app to make sure that for them not to share sort of like private information, like the location of their house or something like that. So we provide the training, and now we are actually just trying to get more people to learn and use this app, so that when a disaster happens in their own neighborhood, they can just take a photo, activate the geolocation feature, and it will show exactly where it is on the map, and rescuers and responders will be able to go there and provide assistance accurately and efficiently. And speaking of efficiency, one of the really big goals for this app is to eventually, if we have enough members, we can help make the response for these disasters more efficient for our humanitarian organization partners and rescuers as well, by providing them the data that they need, like actual verifiable data from the ground, like the number of people and the exact locations of where help and assistance is needed, so they can plan accordingly. Because right now what's happening here in the Philippines, and I'm not sure if it's the same case in Japan and other places in the world, but in the Philippines, it's sort of like an umbrella response that happens all the time. If something bad happens in a general area, which is usually a very big area, like it could be an entire province that's affected by a storm, but not all areas of this province will be equally impacted, of course. So there will be a place where it's severely damaged, and there will be a place where maybe trees have fallen, but not so much impact. So if people can actually post these reports, responders and rescuers can take all of this information and they can include that in their planning, so that they can send the resources, the limited resources they have, to the specific areas where it's actually needed. And this was very, very apparent in 2020 when we responded to Taal volcano. So Taal volcano erupted in 2020. It used to be a very, very big volcano, but now it's very, very short, but still very, very dangerous and still very active. And so in 2020, it came alive, it erupted in a very big area around the volcano was declared a danger zone, of course, understandably. But the problem was that a lot of the people who lived in this area, they were fishermen or they were farmers. And so when the government announced an evacuation, a lot of them decided that they didn't want to leave their fishing boats, they didn't want to leave their farm animals and farm equipment. And so they looked for basically informal evacuation sites. They created their own camps inside the danger zones just so that they can, on a daily basis, check on their farming and fishing equipment and farm animals that they couldn't bring like in one go. And so they stayed there. But the problem was that, of course, a lot of the people coming from these villages and towns, some of them had like medical conditions like asthma, heart conditions, and everything that they needed access to medication to, and they didn't have that. And unfortunately, this entire area was shut down by the government because it was declared a danger zone. So nothing and nobody could get in or out. But the people who were stuck in these evacuation areas, they were not part of the data sets of anyone because nobody knew that they were there actually in the first place. But we did because we had riders inside the danger zone, and we were operating actually we were the only operating delivery service for the people who were stranded inside the danger zone. That was operating 24/7 during this time. And so one of the most unforgettable cases for me actually was that we got a request for a nebulizer machine and the medication needed for it. Nebulizer machine, of course, is something that people who suffer from asthma need when they have an asthma attack. And of all the things that could happen, there was a pregnant woman stuck in a classroom in a very small school somewhere inside the danger zone, and she was having an asthma attack middle of the night. And so we dispatched a rider to deliver the supplies that she needed. And it was like literally middle of the night. And it was around, I think, 60 to 70 kilometers one way. And so it took around an hour and a half to get to her location, but we successfully delivered the things that she needed. And this is the kind of story that I've seen personally over the past 10 years happen in every single disaster response event that bike scouts have been involved. And there's just way too many to mention. And perhaps after Maya and Tim sort of like share their thoughts as well about this very long story of mine, I could share more. So thank you, Maya and Tim.
Oh, Miles, thank you so much. I love one that you're a problem solver, and you're starting with these human stories, and your entire approach is kind of parallel to how I was raised by a pack of Japanese managers. And it was always look for the mind technologies, the basic human. We call them low tech, but I consider the mind, the highest technology. And what you're doing is you're marrying the human mind, with the power of community, and you're coming up with these solutions to very real problems. And I was aware that the Philippines were kind of in that typhoon alley zone. Yeah, I mean, you hear it. I'm always hearing about typhoons hitting the Philippines. Yeah. And so in a sense, it's almost like, talking about climate change, you're like the proverbial canary in the coal mine. You guys are taking the brunt of maybe things to come for other parts of the world, right?
Yep.
And you are solving problems to fulfill that need. And just how you walked us through it, your management approach was so beautiful and so well done, and you're decentralizing and you're relying on people in these areas, but also the fact that you were able to summon this almost grassroots organic movement, and you're using social media as a tool, so that's technology, but what you're really doing is just relying on human bonds and the human mind and the ability to solve these problems, right?
Yeah.
And some of the problems, like the one problem you mentioned, I never thought about the impact of people posting bad information on social media and how that could waste your resources, but also hurt the morale of people if it's the boy who cried wolf. Like, that wasn't even on my radar, but now that you brought it up, it makes perfect sense that it could be very dangerous to post bogus information. And I assume then, again, the app was partly to help solve that problem and also to prevent victims from going viral on social media. But anyway, just my quick thoughts. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And again, the problem solving approach using, basic low tech stuff that's people, I think, underestimate now in the world because we're so inundated with technology and devices and AI. And I almost feel like people don't assign enough importance to the basic human connections in the analog world.
I agree. I actually agree. So you mentioned something about community, and it's actually at the very heart of what we're trying to build with the Bike Scouts. Because very early on, I actually witnessed basically what I would like to call the power of community. And what I've seen is that community sort of like acts like a gravity for people. So it's a gravity that pulls people towards it, towards a common cause or reason to do useful or meaningful things for themselves or for each other. And it has always been there. Like in every country, in every corner of the world, there is this sense of community among people that's sadly, in a lot of cases, it gets a little bit lost, especially in places where life becomes maybe a little bit too busy and we forget that it has always been there and will always be there. A good example of this here in the Philippines is that, yes, of course, we have Uber, we have Grab here in Southeast Asia for like ride hailing and everything. But before that, and even now, when someone sort of like needs help, like for transportation or something, you can just basically ask your neighbor, or you can ask your friends, like who's going to this location. I need to go there because of this and that, and most of the time someone will be there to sort of like help you. And we've seen this happen also even in disaster events. The normal approach to disaster response, for example, is that we need millions of dollars and we need like these really big ships because we need to bring in people and equipment and everything. But whenever we deploy as Bike Scouts to disaster zones, what we discovered is that the people in these areas who are themselves victims of these disasters, they have the most powerful desire, the most powerful reason why they should do something to help themselves and their neighbors and their loved ones. And so a lot of times they would offer, like, I have a vehicle that's undamaged. We can use it to transport supplies to my village just so that we can get it there. And that's a resource that and it's just powered really by community. And I know that in Japan, this is also something that's like really, really embedded in the culture. And this is the reason why here in the Philippines, sense of community, we call this, the Filipino word is bayanihan. So again, that's bayanihan. Bayanihan is basically, the literal translation would be people in the community working together to solve local problems. Like the most visual example of bayanihan in the Philippines, and this has been printed on postcards, posters, and basically school textbooks. Here in the Philippines, people used to live in, we call it nipa huts, which is basically small huts made of like bamboo and coconut leaves and other things. And whenever someone needed to move his or her house to a new location, the neighbors would like come together and literally lift the house off the ground and carry it to the new location. So this is the most like literal, the most visual example of what bayanihan is. But at the same time, it could also mean like sharing a little bit of sugar or salt or rice to people, your neighbors, people in your neighborhood who need it. During the pandemic, this happened, but of course, people didn't really call it bayanihan, but basically it was a very, very good example of what bayanihan is here in the Philippines. During the pandemic, there was like a massive lockdown here in the Philippines. A lot of people lost their jobs because of the lockdowns. And so they had no access to anything that would help them support their families. And so there was this one Filipina woman who came up with the idea of a community pantry. So basically what she did was go on social media and then ask everyone to donate anything that they had extra in their homes to like certain distribution points in their own neighborhood. They would have a table, and everyone would put whatever spare canned goods, eggs, rice, or anything else that they had in the house. They would just put it there, and anyone who needed food on that day, they could just come and take what they need, and that was the end of the transaction, which is like really, for me, one of the most beautiful examples of bayanihan that I can think of in recent times. In the Bike Scouts, we have a version of that we've been doing for the past 10 years. here in the Philippines, I'm sure I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but in the Philippines, Christmas is a very, very big deal. It's such a big deal that we start celebrating Christmas in September, and we usually take down our Christmas trees around January. So yeah, it's super, super big deal here in the Philippines. And one of the downsides of this is that every Christmas season, uh, families would go to department stores, groceries. They would like go buy things for themselves, of course, gifts and other and decorations and food and everything. And whenever the families would walk out of these stores, of course, they would be carrying big bags of the things that they bought. And outside would be homeless kids waiting, hoping that they could get a few pesos or maybe food from people who have just been to fast food eateries. Um, and this is the time of the year that if you're a homeless kid, it would probably be sort of like really amplifying the feeling, the realization that some people have a lot of things in their lives, but they don't. Because they would see families walking out with all of the things that they bought, and they know these homeless kids know that they could never have those things. And so what we've been doing for the past maybe 7 or 8 years is that at midnight on Christmas Eve itself, bike scouts from all over the Philippines would ride out on their bicycles, and they would take whatever it is that they could spare in their homes, food, toys, clothes, anything that was still like really usable or good. They would wrap them up as presents, and then they would write a message of hope or greeting and attach it to that gift, and they would give this to the homeless kids that have to spend Christmas Eve out on the streets. But the special thing that we actually do whenever we do this is that if the homeless kids are with their parents, we would give the gifts to their parents instead, so that it would be the parents that would hand the gifts to their own children. And the reason why we do this is because we would love that these homeless kids would have a memory of their parents giving them something on Christmas, rather than complete strangers just riding in and trying to be heroes and everything. So that's why we do that. And so there's like, I know even in Japan and other parts of the world, there are like a lot of examples of this. And just the fact that just the simple idea, and it's really a big sacrifice for people, especially for Filipinos, to not spend Christmas in their own homes, but instead spend it on the street, giving away things rather than buying things for themselves. It's a big deal, and it's not something that you can just tell people to sort of do, and yet people participate in it. And for me, that really gives me hope, because I know that deep down inside, all of us, or at least most of us, are inherently good as human beings. It's just it's hard to find the right opportunity. It's hard to find the right group of people or even a community to sort of like put that into practice. But I believe that if we continue building communities like the Bike Scouts and providing people with the right opportunity to practice bayanihan, maybe I'm not sure if it's the right term, but in Japan you have your gaman spirit and or something similar to that, something more accurate probably. But if we give people the opportunity to put this mindset, this culture, this behavior or habit into practice, I think there's a chance that we can actually, really, really make a difference without having to wait for like something big to happen, something super grand. Instead, we can just do it by ourselves, do it on our own, even with whatever we have. So, in a way, that is at the heart of what the Bike Scouts community is.
Well, thank you for telling us the stories, Miles. And while I was listening to you, and I was thinking that, as you mentioned, in times of disaster, people really need help, but also in such times at the same time, people are the most prepared to give help, and we need to actually, I don't know whether organize is the right word, but also help those people who want to give help, to provide that help, to really help them do that. Because I remember here in 2011, during or immediately after the earthquake in eastern Japan, there was so much despair, I believe, because huge areas, they were cut off, and there was no access to them. And at that time, the first thing, of course, was everybody was thinking about food and medical supplies for the people there. And that was great. But also at the same time, the people there, they were struggling because they were trying to connect with their loved ones. And many people didn't know whether their loved ones were still alive. And they needed connection. They needed a way to actually find out about the people, the members of their families that they couldn't connect with immediately. And I think that one very important point that you made, and I loved it, is that we always think about the material supplies, which is great. These are absolutely necessary. But we seldom actually, in such cases, think about giving hope. And that's the time when it's really easy to lose hope, when you don't have your loved ones next to you, when there is a lot of distraction around you, and there is so much that you don't know, or you don't know what is going on and what will happen. So I just was listening to you, and I was thinking how genius it is of you to think about those things as well. And maybe to think about them first and start from there, because that's where the human beings actually get power from. It's within themselves. It's within their heart.
Yeah, Maya, to your point about, when you're in these disaster situations, you almost are compelled to not just want help, but to help others. And I experienced it in Hawaii. I lived through two lava flows, one that was like really devastating, and also it was like right on the verge of a hurricane. It was just a slightly below that class, but it was also devastating. And it was really the first time I had been thrown into that situation. And what I found, and also my wife found, was that when we had an opportunity to do something to help others, it actually made us feel better. I almost felt like it was a selfish act, because when you're helping others, it's occupying your time, it's focusing you, and then you do get the satisfaction of seeing other people benefit. It creates stronger bonds with your community. So I kind of understand it, there's almost a need, almost for your own good, to help others.
Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, one of the things that Tim mentioned earlier was about analog solutions, about I think technologies of the mind. I'm sorry if I got that wrong, Tim, but this actually connects very well to what we're doing here with Bike Scouts in the Philippines. Because take, for example, the concept of hope. A lot of times when people think about the concept of hope, we feel that it's a feel good thing, that it's not something that's tangible. But from our experience, from my personal experience working in disaster areas in the past 10 years, hope is actually what drives action. So let me explain. When we think of disasters and disaster response and resilience, we always think of like the material things, which are all very, very much essential, of course. But anyone who has ever sort of like worked in these areas and have seen how the people who are impacted by disasters sort of like feel at that very moment, that they're sitting there and they feel that there's nothing that they can do to help themselves. When the lack of hope eats away at them, like every minute of the day, they sort of like lose the motivation to get up and do something and find like even just small solutions for their own children, for the neighbors. And this is a very, very big deal, because even in the international standard for response, I think it's around 72 hours that they need to be able to organize something, which on paper, of course, it's very, very good. But in reality, if you're like a dad or if you're a mom and a typhoon or a tornado or anything or a flood goes through your neighborhood and destroys your home and your community, you're not going to wait that long, actually, if you have kids or if you have like friends and neighbors who need help. Because in the next hour, people will start to get hungry. Maybe the kids are already cold at this very moment, at the very moment that the storm happens. There is no such thing as a 72 hours. 72 hours is more of an administrative target for disaster response. But the human reality is that when the moment that the disasters happen, help is needed right away. And the first responders are actually the people on the ground. And so, if people had a source of hope, if they knew that they had a community around them that are there, that specifically knows how to sort of like provide help, and are sort of like really have this mindset that they need to act by themselves so that they can help each other, then people would have sort of like a reason to have hope. And if they have hope, people will have a reason to act. And when that happens, we can extend. It extends the period of time that people are able to hold out. People are able to sort of like keep on moving, keep on like problem solving on the ground, even if they're victims themselves, if they have hope.
Yeah, hope is really such a strong, powerful driver. So thank you for that, making that point as well. Because I remember also, it was once again during the first days after the disaster, when many people, even in outside of that area of Tohoku, the Tohoku region, and the areas that were hit by the tsunami, and also were suffering because of the nuclear accident there.
Yeah.
Even here in Tokyo, there were so many people who were just, when you went out in the street, and then I could see how, the mood was so subdued, and that, that worry and the lack of hope and everything it was just there on people's faces. You could see it. So, yeah, it's really important to know how to, is this the right expression, actually? Mobilize that, or how to summon that, and how to help people actually come back and rely on what they have. And I can see David. Thank you very much for coming up. Good morning.
Good morning, Maya. Good morning, everybody. Okay, good morning, Miles. Magandang umaga.
Magandang umaga.
I have the pleasure of working with many Filipino men and women at sea. I work on ships usually.
Oh, wow,
so most
awesome.
of my co-workers are from the Visayas, and a few are Ilocanos, and some from Mindanao and all over. So I picked up some small bits of the
Nice.
language, like Hinay Lang and all that good stuff. So anyway, thank you very much, Miles, for your talk this morning. It's a very powerful talk you've given. It's a very sensitive topic, and I want to give the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do the respect it deserves. So many times in the world we talk about disaster response, and it's easy to look at the news and watch it and forget there's real people involved there. And I love the fact that you're bringing this volunteerism to the front and center. So many people, they think, the fire service or the government or the military maybe will come and help us, but you're absolutely right. The core of any response is the first responders on the ground. It's the people actually living in the area, and you providing them both this amazing app technology so that they can coordinate nationally in a really rapid way, but also providing some sort of structured training is really good. I'll just I'll not talk too long, but I'll tell two short stories. One very recent, one more historical. But myself, because I have had a lot of emergency preparedness training, because I was a soldier 20 years ago, and more recently I work as a sailor, and one of my jobs as a sailor is I'm a firefighter on board the ship. So during the Japanese earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear triple disaster, I was working in a small town, and I was working in the school, and the building started shaking, and everybody didn't know what to do, and the earthquake hit really hard, and we escaped the building with all the children. I was working in a middle school at the time, and then everybody went home. The earthquake, happened at 2:45 in the afternoon, and then 20 minutes later, people just went back to their lives, and we didn't understand how severe it was. There was no real news. And then as the day went longer and longer, we realized there was no water, there was no gas, there was no power, and there was nobody, like you said, the 72-hour window, there was nobody coming to help you. It's up to you. So I got on my bicycle. As you said, the bicycles are an incredible old piece of technology that are so robust in these situations. I got on my bike, and I gathered all my English teaching friends and Japanese friends, and the part of the community that was strongest for me was I did a lot of martial arts, a lot of sword fighting. So I naturally went around all the houses. I woke everybody up. We got them out of the bed and said, we can't stay separate. We need to be a community. We need to be together. I took them all to my Kendo sensei's house, and he hosted us for the first night. And so we at least had people to talk to, or somebody had water in their bath to share. Somebody else brought some food, and we could actually start this planning for the survival, not just relying on outside intervention. So that the first responders and being empowered to take action locally is is a massive thing. And if you're teaching people how to do that around the Philippines, when I know the islands can be so isolated there, that's really, really powerful what you're doing. The second thing is more of a psychological thing. A lot of people in disasters, whether they're Japanese, Filipino, British like myself, they don't know what to do. And a lot of people freeze. They don't do anything. And they just sit there expecting, because it's such an unusual situation, they don't really know, should I leave? Should I go? Should I prepare? Should I do something else? And the training aspect that you're doing with your organization is really powerful. It's a silly story, but yesterday I was having lunch with my wife and my son in a barbecue place. And one of the tables caught fire because accidentally somebody left the barbecue grill on and put some plastic utensils on top of it. And I'm a trained firefighter, so first thing I did is I walked over to it, I switched off the fire, disconnected the gas, and I shouted an alert to the restaurant and to the staff in the restaurant, and nobody moved. Everybody sat in their seats, they didn't move. And me and one of the staff ended up putting this fire out, and everybody just sat there, because they're not trained on how to respond. They're not trained. Is it safer to leave? Is it safer to go? So your organization, by helping the people of the Philippines actually understand when it's the right time to leave, when it's the right time to wait for government, and when it's the right time to step up and be the community leader who fights the fire or saves the person in the neighbor's house or brings the food supply. That's such a powerful service that you're providing. And I take my hat off to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Actually, I'm so happy that you used the bicycle for what you did during the disaster in Tohoku region. It's just amazing. I mean, this is like, I hope I get to meet you when I get the chance to visit Japan, because I really dream of starting a Bike Scouts community there as well. Because a lot of the things that we're doing is actually partly informed and educated by Japanese culture as well. And I think I mentioned this to Maya and Tim during a previous conversation that we had. Because the Japanese culture for like sense of community and resilience even, and experience like throughout the history of Japan with disasters is just so massive that there's so much we can learn from the Japanese people and everyone else who lives in Japan, of course, who experiences these things on a regular basis. And that's why, for me personally, it would be such a big deal if there would be Bike Scouts in Japan as well. And one of the main reasons actually why I fell in love with Japan and started learning about the Japanese culture very early on is because, just like you, David, my late grandfather was actually worked in ships, and he worked in ships specifically in Japan. And so back then, when he was in Japan, he would send back magazines to me about wood carving, woodworking. There was this one magazine specifically that featured carving of small things called I think it's called Netsuke. I'm not sure if I pronounce it right, but I just found this super intricate and super amazing that I was thinking that I need to go to this country, because they're doing so many amazing things. And then later on, I learned about a lot of other things about Japan that really convinced. Until now, it really convinced me that this is a country, this is a place where not really to sort of like work to make money or something, but really to just sit in one corner, probably like I mentioned to Maya and Tim about when I go to Japan, maybe I'll find a park and I'll just sit there, and then the entire day I'll just watch people pass by and see how they sort of like interact with each other, how they live on a daily basis. Because community really, the way that people in a community sort of like interact with each other, it's a very, very good teacher, I think, for a lot of things. And another good thing that you mentioned, Dave, it is actually the fact that when something bad happens, yes, people actually do sort of like tend to freeze up. And I think this has to do with our sort of like natural evolution, or I'm not a scientist, but I feel that that's the reason why. And I've seen this a lot of times during disasters. There was this one particular event. It was another Category 5 typhoon. It impacted an island here in the Philippines called Mindoro. And that time, the entire island went just really dark. All of the power was out, and the highway was blocked by fallen electrical posts and trees and everything else. And so we rode across Mindoro to get to a place called Nauhan. Nauhan has a very, very large lake, and we heard that there was a village, there were several villages actually, that were inundated by floods because the lake started to overflow at the height of the typhoon. And so we rode around 120 kilometers, I think, one way to get to one of these villages. And when we got there, we found people who were sort of like pieces of their what used to be their homes, and they were piling them on top of each other to create a sort of like a mound of debris, just so that their children could have somewhere dry that they could sit in as the rest of the adults in their community stood in waist deep water, basically at night. It was around 7 p.m. that we got there, and the children were all gathered in this mound of debris, and they were hiding under tarpaulin, basically, to keep them warm enough and to protect them from the rain. But basically, they couldn't really decide if they should walk to the highway, which is some distance, and hope that there would be someone there who could sort of like provide them with information or provide them with any kind of assistance. During that time, of course, it would have been futile because coming from the highway, we knew that there was nothing there as well. There were no vehicles that could get through the highway and provide help to anyone that were affected, like in the first few hours after the storm. And so we tried to call a government agency and asking for help, but they too were super, super overwhelmed by the disaster that they could not send anyone. In fact, it would take them almost a week before they could get to this village. And it was really just by using bicycles that we could get there. And at that time, the best that we could do was provide them with whatever supplies that we had in our backpacks, and then which was enough for at least for the kids to have dinner that evening and breakfast the next morning. But it was enough time for us to send the information to our humanitarian agency partners, and they were the ones who eventually put this on the map, and then they took the helicopters so that they could deliver essential supplies. So thank you so much, David. This really connects with our experience here in the Philippines, and I hope I get to meet you one of these days.
Well, thank you, Miles, for that story. Maya, I know we're coming close to closing time, but we have a few minutes, right?
Yes, we have a few minutes. So Yuka, hello to you.
Okay, I can talk fast enough that I can finish up my very two simple questions in 3 minutes. And hi, Miles, that was a great story and heartwarming, and I learned a lot. I didn't even know the term bike scouts. So, and then your story just reminded me at the 2011, I was living in San Diego, California at that time, and then it was so sunny, and then we were just looking at the TV, and it's tsunami hitting all those towns and ships, and then I remember I felt so guilty. Okay, can I just have fun here, just not doing anything and just looking at those people and suffering? But anyway, so I have and then now I live in, Dallas, Texas, and it's huge. So the bike may not be feasible, but you mentioned this apps. So, and I was just thinking, apps, what if we lose power? Can we still use apps? I know it's just borderline stupid question, but I've just kept asking myself, how does it work?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a very good question. So the Bike Scouts app works together with the community, because the first thing that we lose during a disaster event is actually power, and of course any kind of technology, whether it's a typhoon or a tornado or something similar to that. In Texas, I know that you've had not recently, but in the past few years, you've had like massive flooding. You've also had like a really, really bad blizzard, like a cold spell.
Yeah, we have everything.
Yeah. And the reason why I know this is because we actually have a partner organization in Texas called Crowdsourced Rescue. And so they sort of like do the same thing. And during the time that they were doing disaster response in Texas for both the flooding and the blizzard, they were actually in touch with us. The founders of this amazing organization were in touch with us, and we were sharing sort of like experiences and anything that they could share online to help them do their work. And they said the same thing, that Texas is so big that maybe a bicycle would not be the perfect solution. But I think bicycles, even in such a big place, has a role to play, because a lot of times when a disaster happens, we don't really need to ride too far to find the things that we need. Like, for example, maybe we just need water. Maybe we just need a little bit of food or medication. And we can usually find this around the area where we live in. But during a disaster, because we don't realize the difficulty of mobility until we lose access to like motor vehicles. On a car, maybe a 15-minute drive is nothing to us. But when we lose the ability to drive on roads, when roads get shut down, then that's the time that we start to remember that if I have to walk this distance that I used to drive for like 10, 15 minutes, it's actually going to be a very long way because I have to walk out and back again to where I came from. But if we have like bicycles, it would provide us short distance travel options so that we can find the kind of like any kind of supplies or any kind of help that we can find within our own area. And what we do actually here in the Philippines is that we don't need to ride far to transfer information when we lose access to the app, to the internet, or to the mobile services. What we do is that we have our information that we want to pass on. We ride our bicycle to a point where there would be another bike scout or anyone who would be willing to help us sort of like carry this information. We would pass on that information to this person. And maybe if there's still no mobility there, that person would also ride a bicycle and ride somewhere where there would be access to internet, mobile service. And that really brings it back to the usefulness and the value of community as sort of like the driving force and being the thing that's at the heart of resilience and even sustainability for all of us in this age of the climate crisis. Thank you so much, Yuka.
Well, thank you so much. We're gonna go out and then buy a couple of
Yes,
bikes.
please. Thank you. Please share photos.
Yuka, I don't know whether you have heard this, but immediately after the 3/11 earthquake here in Japan, the Fukushima earthquake and the disaster, on that day, when millions and millions of people here in Tokyo walked back home because the trains and they were not moving.
Oh, I know, I've heard that. Yes.
Yes. And then the cars, they were jammed. So at the end of the day, all the bicycle shops, they sold out, all the bikes they had. So people just on their way from work to their homes, they bought bicycles.
That's
I got to get into shape, man. I really have to get into shape.
Yes. Yeah, so that was really something to see, and I appreciate it. And it was so simple. Logically simple, but at the same time brilliant, and then at that point, I actually understand the power of bicycles and how important they are in times when nothing else moves. You have either your two legs or the two wheels of the bicycle, and that's it.
Yeah, and speaking of power, to Yuka's question, if the power's out and you're using an app, I assume you're using battery powered and I used to use I bought a mini solar charger right before the hurricane hit, and that really helped out a lot to keep my phone charged. So are those the sources of energy you're using when the power's down, Miles?
We use a lot of different types, but mostly solar, yes. We have a partner here called Hive Energy. So the founder is actually also a bike scout based in Mindoro Island here in the Philippines, and he's an engineer. And because of his experience as well in the community, he got this idea that he needed to build like an alternative power source for people that were, of course, in the Philippines, when something bad happens, electricity just really goes out automatically. Even if it's just like a heavy downpour, if there's lightning and thunder, we lose power very quickly. And so he built this like homemade, basically, his original design for this battery pack, with a solar panel, he took up the toolbox, the kind that you would buy from any hardware, and then basically put up all of the electronics in that, and you can just plug in your device that you wanted to charge. So this was really, really ingenious, actually.
Excellent.
Yes, excellent. And it's already 4 minutes past 9 o'clock. Miles, thank you very much again for agreeing to be our guest speaker today and for making time for us.
Thank you so much. Arigatou gozaimasu, everyone. Until next time.
Until next time. Thank you.